In distant Russia, land of forests, bears and huge meadows lived Prince Ivan, a brave and fierce hunter who liked to go out alone in search of adventure. At times he would wander far from the palace and spend weeks touring the fields, villages, mountains and valleys of Russia. In one of those adventures he unknowingly entered the domain of an evil sorcerer named Kastchi. The Witcher possessed the gift of eternal life as he had cast a spell and was keeping his heart inside an egg deep within his fortress that was guarded by hideous monsters. Anyone who entered the domain of Kastchi was once discovered by the magician or by one of his monsters, was turned into a stone statue that later adorned the gardens that surrounded the castle of Kastchi. The evil Kastchi, after turning the unwary into stone statues, kidnapped his daughters and kept them captive in his domains as trophies for their evil deeds. That is, they could not flee from the grounds of the gardens because the monsters that were under the command of the magician would bring them back, and if they persisted in their idea of escaping they were also turned into stone statues. Ignorant of all these events, Ivan unknowingly entered the domain of Kastchi and soon discovered a beautiful bird of an intense golden color perched on a tree. As soon as Ivan saw him he hurried to find his bow and arrows to hunt down such a wonder. What Ivan did not know was that in truth the bird was a woman turned into a bird by the magician. The wonderful bird, when hearing noise behind him, took flight quickly and Ivan went in pursuit of him. Each time they were entering more and more in the dominions of Kastchi. Finally, the tired bird landed on the ground thinking that the hunter had been left far behind and could regain strength, but he did not know that Ivan was an expert hunter and was used to running after his prey. In an instant, Ivan stood next to the bird and pointed his bow at the heart. "No," said the bird. "Please, have mercy, don't kill me." Ivan backed away open-mouthed. "You can talk," said Ivan. "What magic is this?" "You must know," the bird began to speak, "that you have entered the domain of a terrible magician, and everyone who dares to enter his territory the magician turns into a stone statue, flees before Kastchi finds out that are you here." Ivan smiled at such a request. He was a brave warrior and a master of the bow and arrow. He was not afraid of any wizard no matter how powerful he might be. "Go if you want," said Ivan to the golden bird, "and warn the Witcher that Ivan has entered his lands and that I will face him and win." "You don't know what you're saying," replied the bird. "Kastchi is very powerful. He has a great army of monstrous beings that help him." The bird took one of its golden feathers that reflected the sunlight as if they were fire and gave it to Ivan. "Flee these lands. Escape before Kastchi is aware of your presence," he said, "and if you need help shake this pen and I will come to your aid." Ivan saw how the bird took flight, and when he saw it with the sun reflected in its plumage, he thought it was really a firebird. Heeding the wise advice he had received, he decided to leave those lands, but in the distance he heard laughter and a splash of water. He quietly approached and saw a group of girls playing in the river. One of them caught his attention, Ivan, and immediately fell in love with this girl. When the young women were discovered they fled to the castle of Kastchi, since among the multiple conditions that they had in their captivity one of them was not to speak with any stranger. Ivan followed them to discover the name of his beloved, and forgetting the advice of the firebird he goes further into the lands of the magician. Upon hearing the scandal, the monsters guarding the Kastchi domain came to see what was happening and discovered Ivan. They surrounded him, and Ivan, ready to fight, immediately drew his bow and arrows ready to defend himself. Although there were many of them, he would not allow himself to be captured by such horrible beings. The monsters howled terribly, and immediately Kastchi appeared with an angry face, ready to turn the intruder into a statue that adorned his gardens. Ivan, seeing himself overcome by so many evil beings, remembered the advice of the firebird, and taking out the golden feather he waved it in the air. In a flash, a song so melodious and sweet that the monsters and even Castury himself ceased to be heard in their fierceness and began to dance possessed by that magical melody. They danced for a while and one by one fell into a deep sleep. The girls that Ivan was chasing came to his aid and urged him to leave the Castury lands now that with the help of the Bird of Fire was asleep. No, the prince refused. I will not leave you here abandoned. Let us all flee. Let us leave these lands cursed by the terrible wizard and return to our homes. We cannot, the captives told him. Castury has us prisoners. If we escape, he turns us into statues. Well, let's kill the magician and his horrible monsters, Ivan proposed. Let's take advantage of the fact that they are asleep. You can't, they told him. Castury, he is immortal. You cannot kill him. He has his heart stored in an egg. Nothing is destroyed. Nothing can hurt him. I do know where he hides it, commented the Firebird. It is inside a crystal egg in the depths of his fortress. Take me there, said Ivan. I will destroy the egg and free you all from your captivity. The bird took the prince to the wizard's fortress and led him to the deepest cellars. There in the middle of a disgusting lake was the egg with the heart of Castury. Meanwhile, the sorcerer and his monsters woke up from the dream that the Firebird had produced in them. Castury, fearful of what might happen, ran like lightning towards the dungeons of the palace, followed by the army of monsters. Full of anger and ready to destroy Prince Ivan, he found him with the egg in his hands. Castury, seized with a terrible rage, looked at him with enraged eyes and ready to do anything. He threw himself at Ivan, casting the spell to turn him into a stone statue. Ivan, brave as he was not afraid of the magician and his spell, and throwing the egg with all his might smashed it to the ground, breaking it into 1,000 pieces. The evil wizard screamed in agony when he saw his shattered egg on the ground, and in a terrible scream he disappeared with all the monsters he had created. The entire palace began to creak and its walls began to crack. Ivan hurried out of the palace dodging stones. When he finally came out into the daylight, he saw how everything when the evil Castury had done was crumbling. The palace, the gardens, the fountains, everything disappeared. The statues were once again people of flesh and blood. The captive girls hugged their parents and brothers and, full of joy, returned to their homes. Ivan met with his beloved and they returned to the castle in his domain. There they married and lived happily. As for the Firebird, he was left guarding what had been the domain of Castury. In his wickedness, the magician had prevented him from returning to his original appearance. Now he is the one who tells the story of how Ivan had managed to defeat the terrible magician Castury, who maintained the terror for a long time in those domains.